Hello, surfing guys and gals. This is...
Finally, Ubisoft understands how white Christian people are the problem in American society with their new game. My non-gender binary skin complexion can feel safe knowing there is a game where I can fictitiously kill misogynist alt-right rednecks in the name of social justice.
Now, hold on there, you commie hippie fag. Those French folks at Ubisoft are just demonizing proud American Christian people with their propaganda of an antagonizer as a white male Christian. I'm born kind of this piece of shit.
Well, duh, you oppressive shitlord. I mean, come on. It's the current year, of course.
Ah, shoot you for saying that about me. Hell, at least your faggoty little hair dye makes you an easy target. You people never learn. Well, it seems that my False Dichotomies in Blink has now officially become a mini-series on this channel, what with yet another dollop of the left and the right vying for supremacy of their chosen narrative, with Far Cry 5's gameplay trailer, which depicts an extreme religious cult forcefully taking control of a northern Montana county. Being me, I thought nothing of it, knowing full well that extreme cults have attempted to take over towns with little avail that have callbacks to American Christianity. And what with the American population identifying overwhelmingly as Christian, it comes to no surprise to me that one such cult could have themes related to Christianity, such as the cover of Far Cry 5 being a mock-up of the Last Supper but in white trash form. But, of course, nothing is without outrage and controversy, and presumably conservatives and people on the right, the ones who claim to be the ones who are for free speech, and about reals before feels, got a hissy fit that a game would depict such a religious cult as even being remotely Christian, despite the fact that I'm sure the people who will be fighting against them are Christian too, such as with Pastor Jerome Jeffries, and the SJWs taking opportunity of their hissy fit with a petition to change aspects of Far Cry 5 that is so patently retarded that it sounds like a SJW or journo plant pretending to be an offended conservative to paint them as equally offended as SJWs, despite they could have demonstrated that without making a fake petition and just shown some comments on behalf of the trailer, or even the InfoWars article on the gameplay trailer. So as with my previous episodes on said false dichotomies, I will tackle both sides of the soccer field with the aforementioned fake petition, and then taking a trip to the comments on the Far Cry 5 trailer with some choice picks on behalf of said offense. As a disclaimer, I like to add that there were plenty of comments on Far Cry 5 of Christians who were not offended by the trailer and found it exciting to play a Far Cry game set in America, and there were hardly any SJWs who were jumping with glee over the idea that a game would depict white people as evil. This is also not to say that Ubisoft could perhaps be doing this change of theme and setting to push a narrative, as they did with the inclusion of a female protagonist and transgender character in Assassin's Creed Syndicate, but I'd rather wait until more details of the game have been known, considering that this fucking game won't come out until February of next year, and it already has deluxe editions, making me think that this game is not going to be worth the time. And honestly, I would really think that'd be the current concern on everyone's mind. Far Cry 4 was basically a slightly worse ripoff of Far Cry 3's working themes, and it seems that Ubisoft are incapable of refreshing the gameplay elements of Far Cry 3 and instead deciding to reuse those same gameplay elements, but coat it with a different dab of paint. But nevertheless, we must carry on to demonstrate how being vigilant for one side makes you blind to the concerns of the another. Let's see what the petition has to say about this awful game.
Enough is enough, Ubisoft. I have had it with these motherfucking white people in this motherfucking game.
I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself.
We've sat through your multicultural lectures and your preachy games aimed at degenerates and miscegenators.
Miscegenators? Is that even a word? Much less one that people who don't like SJWs even use. Also, I wasn't aware that a game publisher holds multicultural lectures, but do go on.
We've tolerated in the name of gameplay design and innovation, but no more.
Man, this petition is rolling all the cliches in just this paragraph alone.
Far Cry 5 is an insult to your fanbase, the Americans who make up the majority of your customers, and it's time you woke up to the fact. Change this or cancel this.
This is the part where I'm almost sure that this wasn't written by someone who is naturally opposed to the SJW side. Why would they demand, or even entertain, the idea of a game being cancelled to preserve their own petty sensibilities? If it is genuine, they don't seem to realize that they are very much the same as the SJWs they loathe, and if it is disingenuous, well, no surprise to me that an SJW plant pretending to be a conservative or whatever would demand an alteration of something in a game for their sake. Us gamers have had to endure a lot of crap over the last few years. The targeted harassment by the mainstream press through Gamergate. Now hold on, isn't the mainstream media always going on how Gamergate is a harassment campaign disguised as wanting ethics in game journalism? Not to mention that not all gamers side with Gamergate for one, but almost everyone who does side with Gamergate is a gamer to some extent. So how is it the gamers load to carry that Gamergate gets flacked as they do? I also don't get the logic of trying to paint the other side as the true harassers while also simultaneously making yourself the victim. Once again, this petition reeks of that one meme image of Steve Buscemi with the hip Gamergator t-shirt, but reeks of all the SJW calls, yet wants to be a part of the cool kids club. The terrible launch and outright lies of highly anticipated video games, that of which is completely separate from what themes a game may carry, as well as Gamergate for that matter, and this petition won't stop blind sycophants from getting hype over the next Halo or Call of Duty and empty their wallets for more DLC and season passes and microtransactions in full purchase releases, you retard. The outright censorship of art through localization policies that continue rejection of romantic partners when they find out our hobby. Again, how in the fuck do these two things coincide with the villain being a presumably Christian extremist and white? It seems like the most petty self-issue that whoever started this petition holds. The appropriation of our culture by so-called gamers on Twitter. No more. What? You do realize by saying that, you are a fucking social justice warrior, no? They go on and on about cultural appropriation all the time, but even if we are to assume that it's true, you didn't even use it correctly. Cultural appropriation, as far as I've heard it, is taking culture away from a specific demographic of people, and gamer is not a specific demographic of people as it includes all walks of life. So indeed, I'd say you are worse by comparison of using the cultural appropriation card in an attempt to set the specific white line of gamer and not a gamer. It's time to draw a line in the sand. We, the American gamers that make up the majority of your user base, demand to you cancel this game or alter it to be less offensive to your main player base. Let's see, cultural appropriation, offensive, targeted harassment, yeah. This most definitely reeks of a whiny SJW pretending to be a counterculture warrior against the status quo. And ultimately, if you are one, canceling the game is the only option because any change that they do make will still be offensive to you anyway. In these times, you must understand that there might be violent repercussions if you intend to follow through with your pointless criticism. Pointless criticism is one way to define this entire petition, but I have to ask, what violent repercussions will come from the release of this game? Are you insisting that SJWs are going to shoot down Christian white people? Or are you implying that you yourself will commit violence if Ubisoft doesn't change? You're really begging the question here. So here are the suggestions to make your game right. Change the villains. It's not so hard really, just change the villains to something more realistic. Oh yeah, because Far Cry, less video games, have always been about realism, right? And as far as realism goes in Far Cry 5, 80% of the American population identifies as Christian, so it actually makes sense that this extremist cult has Christian undertones in it. I saw comments where people were insisting that it be people from ISIS, but that would in fact not make sense because ISIS sympathizers, or even Islamic extremists, are such a tiny minority in the US compared to other Western countries and the Middle Eastern countries where they are bred. Islam is on the rise in America, as is the violence of inner-city gangs. See, what did I tell ya? And Islam is not on the rise in America. In the UK, in Germany, in Sweden, sure. But this game isn't set in those areas. And for inner-city gangs, remember that this game is set in Montana, and not, say, Detroit, Michigan, or Chicago, Illinois, or something of that equivalent. Montana is basically a bumblefuck plains area with a lot of tiny towns interconnected. You're not going to find a lot of gangs there, but you're more likely to find some homegrown extremists, ironically enough. Are you scared to do so? In the words of Voltaire. Holy shit, you are retarded. It's Voltaire, and I'm almost certain that the words you'll be taking from him are not what he actually said, much less the defining philosophy of him. To learn who rules you, simply find out who's not being criticized. Yeah, that is such a stupid quote, if he ever said it. You know what Voltaire also said? I disagree with what you have to say, but defend your right to say it to the death. Even if you find it offensive or appalling, their depiction of white Christian America in this game, shouldn't you be for their right to do so, given that it's entirely fictional? Our government rules over us, but do you see people not giving them an ounce of criticism? Yeah, blow me. Alter the villains. Don't know how that's any different from changing them, but okay. Even if you insist on making the villains American Christians, consider mixing the races a bit to not target white people exclusively. Now, if I was an SJW, I would say that Far Cry 5 is racist and that they need to include more people of color as the villains in said game. How are you any different from them again? There are plenty of nationalists of every stripe and every race and creed. Goody good, but this game is focused on American Christian extremism, which overwhelmingly has white people because America is made up mostly of white people to begin with. I highly doubt that you'd levy the same criticism of the Black Lives Matter group, or say ISIS or radical Islam for that matter. So throw in some blacks and Mexicans. There's no reason a protectionist nationalist movement would all be one race. Why stop being politically correct here? The mere fact that you want to include other races for the sake of not targeting or excluding one from the bunch is being politically correct. Have you no sense of irony or self-awareness that everything that you have demanded sounds exactly what an SJW would say, but instead of including minorities to make white people less targeted, include them to diversify with the white people. And ultimately a protectionist, nationalist movement will also become a fascist one and define race much more strictly in their code of terms. No guarantee that will ever come up in this game, but it's just food for thought given that Antifa and BLM have begun defining race so strictly as one would. Alter the plot. It's obvious that you can continue to insist on using these characters. And these characters would be... We don't see any recurring characters from the previous Far Cry, so what exactly are you inferring? That the main villain is an insane yet charismatic person? However, with a few artistic tweaks, you can save the concept entirely. Okay, buddy, we know nothing about this game's plot apart from that an extremist cult takes over a town in our county. So why are you jumping the gun when this game doesn't come out until next fucking year? Is beyond me. Have the villains simply be misguided patriots, forced into making their own nation versus the will of an oppressive overgovernment, construed of all the people they turn their wrath against in their immediate surroundings. You know a true patriot wouldn't try to uphold their own government. They would help to embolden it rather than create their own. Again, how do we know that is the philosophy behind the main villain? We don't know anything of his motives or why he is doing this, so stop trying to inject assumptions into it so that you can arbitrarily fill a list of demands. Their brutal physical and sexual violence towards their oppressors will then be explained as a reaction to harsh government policies and taxation to show that both sides are wrong. How about their actions are not indicative of the same religious belief as, say, Jerome Jeffries in the same fucking game? Maybe the sentiment that Far Cry 5 is trying to tell you is that being an extremist who tries to enforce their own religion down on other people is wrong, and not that a religion is wrong inherently. Change the setting, but only for certain markets. Certain markets? Are you saying that the game should be sold in different versions in different areas? That surely won't be extremely costly, and to use a word lightly, problematic to the market value of the game. I get that anti-Americanism plays in France. I highly doubt that's the reason they are choosing to set Far Cry 5 in America, because if it did play well, wouldn't all of the Far Cry games be set in America? It just sounds like you have a low opinion of French people, honestly. Also, how would it be beneficial to Ubisoft to try to ostracize their core demographic? And I'm not telling you to give up on potential profits due to complaints. Jesus Christ, did you take a card from the Aeneas Sarkeesian playbook? If you didn't have a fucking problem with it, you wouldn't have brought it up in the first place. So, of course, you want them to give up on it because you are complaining that they had to set it in America. Wouldn't want to be thought of as one of those hypocrite feminists, right? Too late for that, buddy. You sound like a hypocritical SJW trying to implant themselves as an anti-SJW. But for America, right now, anti-Americanism is out. You gotta play your market. Change the saying to Canada for America. Do you not think that them changing the saying of Far Cry to the Americas was not them playing into their market? Think about this, right? The Grand Theft Auto games have always been set in a major city or major cities in the USA, and the Grand Theft Auto games up to this point have always had this misanthropic and critical satire of the current politics and values that Americans hold. So, does that mean that Rockstar Games shouldn't set their game somewhere in the USA because somehow them criticizing it isn't playing to the American market? Come the fuck on. This way, you don't turn away potential players due to offensiveness, just trying to help you make money. Oh, and we wouldn't want to hurt the poor women, gamers' feelings, right? Some people might get offended that a game be set in the United States and have a religious extremist with Christian undertones. We have to change a game. I am in no way like the Shrieking Harpies demanding that Overwatch's tracer pose need to be changed or complain that May isn't fat as I hoped. I'm just trying to help you make money, of course. It's not like trying to appease a minority in the group turns away a majority like it did with Platonic and Luca-Laylee dropping Drontron because of some things he said, and watch that horribly backfire in my ass. Follow one or more of these, and this game will be saved from PC hell and multicultural development. We Americans have so few games to call our own, and we're tired of losing them to multicultural bullshit. Yeah, that entire line doesn't sound like the strawman argument that feminist gamers make that their dissenters say to them when they try to infect their values into video games. But my culture arguments, basically. So that was the entirety of this Change.org petition until the person who started it made an uproariously long update to it, sounding like a conspiracy theorist on one hand and attempting to use logic to attract people who are under the impression that he's a journal or a SJW plant to give media a new hit piece to fill the 23 hours out of the 24 hours they need to cover news, before going on a long knee-jerk reaction about how gamers spend so much time playing their games. There are also a slew of tweets by people who are laughing at what was basically a joke of a petition, and whether they are journalists or not, SJWs or not, they're clearly not taking this petition seriously like I'm not. It also makes me think that with the long-winded response by this person, what with the huge spelling errors and grammatical mistakes, that whoever he or she is genuine in what they believe, as unfounded as those beliefs are. Still, it is strange that in the name of trying to fight against PC culture and SJWs, they are using the same tactics that PC culture and SJWs use to push change into a media. I would love to cover all of it, but it'll make this video way too long than it will be. So now, we'll visit the gameplay trailer itself and find some salty people who think that Ubisoft are doing this shit on Americans somehow. Matt Altea starts the first false dichotomy with, the same people who don't want this game based in the US are most likely the same people who would find female main characters in games offensive. The SJWs or the conservatives? Trick question, but really, don't SJWs also complain about female main characters or female characters in general being too sexy? Studley Goatman attempts to spot a pattern with RE7, Outlast 2, and Far Cry 5. The war against rednecks have begun. I'm sure that the developers and the publishers all gather around in a secret bunker and talk about how best to subjugate the white Christian Americans too, right? Would you call it the Illuminati by chance? Sean C. nearly makes an astute point with saying, so there was no argument to kill Africans and Pacific Islanders in previous Far Cry games, but having it set here taking out a cult of white dudes is offensive? If that's the case, I'm going Django on these fuckers. Actually, there were left-leaning people who were complaining about presumed gentrification over a white person killing East Islanders and an Americanized Asian person fighting North Indian/South Chinese people in the previous games, although those were few and far between and done at a time where this social justice nonsense wasn't up in everyone's sleeves. But if they weren't addressed, yeah, I wonder too why they weren't equally offended at that. Spanish Patriot bleeds his heart out for his country with, Another franchise destroyed by political correctness and its aggressive agenda pushing. R.I.P. Far Cry. As with the petition, don't jump the gun too soon, buddy. Surely, this could be an agenda push, but since you have seen so little of the game, you can't say for certain that they will. Who knows? Maybe all of these people whining about the premise of the game will inadvertently cause Ubisoft to make the game political, ironically giving people exactly what they complained against. Undead Texas retraces another stupid arguing point from said petition with, why not just make it ISIS, since that's what the game is going for, but instead it has to be evil Christians? Was it what the game was going for? Because if I recall, forcefully baptizing people in ponds and lakes wasn't an edict of the Quran, nor was it to even attempt to convert idolaters into your cult. Also, the way that they dress doesn't express that message either, and the setting, and basically 95% of the game doesn't express that, so why do you desperately want this game to be anti-ISIS? Pretty Hall pulls the wool off our eyes on, it's a marketing ploy! People are just complaining about Christians complaining! We, sons and daughters of Christ, really aren't complaining! But how do we know that you aren't a ploy set to make the Christian conservatives look good by saying that it's a marketing ploy? How do we know that ploy is a counterploy by the ploy you are currently calling out? Or that ploy is a counterploy to the ploy of you being a ploy calling out a ploy? Ploy. The last meth bender manages to break the backs of both sides with, y'all bitch about Gamergate for years talking about how you're sick of people bringing politics into video games. Yet all you snowflakes are bitching about the game's story and trying to bring real-world issues into a fucking video game. Are you talking about the social justice warriors complaining about Gamergate, or gamers complaining about Gamergate? I'm sure some people didn't want politics in their games, and some people of Gamergate didn't want politics in their games either. Honestly, I'm confused as to whether your claim of Gamergate pushing politics is even true when their entire mission statement was to refurbish ethics in games journalism through and through. And finally, Mr. Twinkie 2007 gives us a whole diatribe with, this game seems to show the Muslim invasion, but instead of using the Muslims, they pick Christians, and depict them as the killers, which is completely the opposite of what Jesus and religion teaches. One of the 10 Commandments is not to kill, and other teaching is to love your neighbor. The game has went with relevance to current world events to aid sales and simultaneously tries to depict Christianity in a bad light. People who kill aren't Christian. They don't follow Jesus' teachings. Knights Templars weren't Christians either. Anyone willing to take a life regardless of the circumstance isn't a Christian. Jesus even said if someone was to smack you on one cheek, you are to offer them the other as well. If someone was to steal your coat, you offer them your shirt as well. If someone was to ask you to travel with them 1 mile, you go with them for 2. Nothing the Bible teaches would turn you into a crazy murderer like the guy depicted in this game. The emphasis you are missing from here is extremism. Christian extremism. Extremism is a more perverted angle of the belief that someone else holds, so for anyone who thinks that this game is about anti-Christianity, you are wrong. For anyone who thinks this game is taking away focus from Islamic extremism, like as if video games are a platform for current politics, which they aren't, then you are missing the mere fact that this game will inevitably be more helpful to fight all kinds of extremism, be they Islamic or Christian. Just because they don't wholly present a fucking caricature of the Muslim faith does not mean that it's endemic of them disregarding terrorism or radical Islamic sympathies in America. Ubisoft is not a company out for a political talking point, unless pressure from other outside media tells them to. Stop insisting that it is. They make fucking games, not politics. Also, I don't give a shit about what your metaphorical sky fairy told you or what your fairy tale book says. Actions speak louder than words. Do you see Christians not mixing fabrics? No. Do you see Christians working on the Sabbath, aka Sunday? Yes. It's the same apologetics that feminists use when they throw the dictionary definition of feminism out to detract from how feminists acted in contrary to its definition, as well as the apologetics of the Quran by insisting that Islam is a religion of peace, despite how violently faithful the indoctrinated get. Your little scripture is only practiced when people call you out as the hypocrites you are. And I'm not insisting that you faithfully follow by your fairy tale book, but if you're not going to, have a bit of self-reflection when people point out those who act violently on the same spaghetti monster that you praise upon. Video's over, folks. Tune in next time when the two sides clash valiantly over some media not catering to them.